Hello, my name is Brogan Weston, and this is my dissertation presentation on Beyond the Skin, client perceptions of tattooed and pierced counsellors in the therapeutic space. So first of all, what we're going to be looking at is a timeline of historical perceptions of tattoos and piercings. So we start 5,000 plus years into the past, where the earliest recorded tattoos and piercings were seen. However, due to the length of time between these tattoos being done and when they were discovered, there is still a lot of mystery on what these tattoos and symbols represented. The first tattoos and piercings that we could see had any meaning to them was in ancient Egypt, where tattoos were seen as symbols of protection and fertility, and piercings were used as social status representation. We then jump to ancient Polynesia, where tattoos signified social status and for rites of passage, so being given to an individual when they met certain milestones in life. We then jump to classical Greece and Rome, where tattoos were symbols of bravery in soldiers, as well as tributes to certain gods. Whereas with criminals and slaves, they were given tattoos as forms of punishment. In medieval Europe, with the introduction of the Catholic Church, there was also a very large change in perception of tattoos. They were very much more less frequent because of this shift. However, Crusaders still used tattoos for symbols of faith. When we look at 4,000 plus years into the past, we can also see the trend of nose piercings becoming very much more prominent in the Middle East, as well as in later, they were also very popular in South Asia. And in the modern era, we can very much see a shift in culture, showing that there is much more of a shift in looking at identity and perceptions of self-expression. When we look at this modern shift in body art perception, we can see that it was very much heavily associated with different countercultures, such as biker groups, sailors, and criminals. However, tattoos and piercings are now a lot more socially accepted and aren't so much associated with those groups. Body art has gained mainstream visibility, shifting the norms around self-expression and identity. However, when we look at body art in a professional context, there's increasingly visible body art in traditional conservative fields such as healthcare, education, and mental health. And how does this change the perception of these tattoos and piercings in this modern bias? Well, there is still bias. Professionals with body art are often seen as much less competent and trustworthy. There is also inside of this a gender bias, whereas more men with tattoos are seen as more competent and professional than women with tattoos in these very conservative or traditional fields. This therefore raises the important questions of what is the role of visible self-expression in professional settings, especially mental health professions. So when we look at mental health professions, we look at counsellors as part of that mental health profession. And what makes effective counselling, what makes effective therapy? Well, when we look at Rogers' research, it's very much deep-seated in the core conditions, which means that to have effective therapy, there must be these core conditions present to build a therapeutic relationship. And these core conditions are empathy, which is a deep understanding and promotes healing and safety; unconditional positive regard, which means that a therapist is accepting clients without judging them; and congruence, which means that a therapist is very authentic to themselves and builds trust and openness that way. So what happens when we include body art into therapy? Therapist body art adds complexity to the therapeutic dynamic between counsellor and client. It brings visible self-expression, which may affect client impressions and comfort levels. It means that therapists are being a lot more authentic to themselves, bringing that congruence into regard, and this can include body art. It also enhances congruence and professional integrity, encourages clients' authenticity and trust, and supports clients' identity exploration and acceptance. Visible body art can act as a non-verbal cue of acceptance and authority. Sorry, empathy, not authority. However, as always, there are potential challenges to this. There is a increased social acceptance of tattoos and piercings. However, despite this, stereotypes do still exist. The stereotypes of people with tattoos and piercings being unprofessional or rebellious. These biases may impair trust and rapport within the therapeutic relationship in early therapy. These biases can be shaped by cultural and generational or personal beliefs. And due to this may therefore compromise a client's psychological safety within the room. Therapists must really try to find a balance of authentic self-expression with sensitivity to client perceptions. As said, there is also an impact on clients. Clients may feel more understood and accepted, especially if they identify with this therapist's self-expression. So if a client is coming to a therapist who is heavily tattooed and pierced, and the client is heavily tattooed and pierced, this can really bring a level of acceptance to the room. Therapist body art may also foster empowerment as well as affirmation to individual likes and dislikes, and can also bring a level of safety into the therapeutic space. So the overall aim of our study is we are wanting to investigate whether visible body art influences client perceptions of these core therapeutic conditions, those core therapeutic conditions being empathy, unconditional positive regard, and congruence. Our hypothesis is that there will be a positive correlation that exists between therapist and client similarity in self-expression and strength of the therapeutic relationship. As I said before, if a client is heavily tattooed and pierced, they are more likely to find their therapist who is tattooed and pierced more trustworthy. When we look at the methods of our research, we can break this down to participants, the design of the study, the independent variables, the dependent variables, and the control variables. So our participant pool was quite big. We had 175 participants from the general population of England and Wales. However, a large proportion of the recruitment was done through Sona, which is a portal that we use through the university, as well as social media and SciToolkit. When we look at the design of the study, we used a mixed methods design combining both quantitative and qualitative approaches. Our independent variables were as such. So the primary independent variable in the study was body art, but there were 4 levels to this. No visible body art, which was the control group, visible tattoos only, visible piercings only, and visible tattoos and piercings. So there were 4 different contexts. The dependent variables were congruency, empathy, unconditional positive regard, which are our core conditions, as well as the therapeutic relationship and therapeutic willingness. Our control variables were sex, gender, sexuality, age, nationality, ethnicity, religion, and political views. We wanted to see whether any of these variables had an effect. The procedure went as follows. So the participants first accessed the questionnaire through SciToolkit and completed it in their own time. There was a first page asking about consent. Participants were given informed consent to take part. The demographics, so participants answered about their age, sex, gender, body art, with those control variables and past experiences with therapists with visible body art. They therefore then rated the therapists. So participants viewed an image of a therapist. These were doctored images that were used. So on the side here, we can see these were 3 of the example images we used. All of these images had both piercings and tattoos. So these were the mixed pool. We then asked them some exploratory questions, which brought the qualitative data into account. So participants were asked additional qualitative questions about their views on body art therapists. So they were shown one of these photos and they were asked, do you think this person is trustworthy? Do you think this person would be empathetic? And they were asked for free comments at the end. So participants were then asked to provide any open-ended comments. The results of this, so we did t-tests to look at the significance of the results. There weren't a lot of significant results. The main one that was significant was unconditional positive regard. So when we look at the discussion and interpreting these findings, we see that there's an overall neutral effect. So visible tattoos generally had no negative impact on client perceptions of core therapeutic conditions. There was a consistency in empathy judgments. So the fact that tattoos did not alter perceptions of empathy suggests that clients evaluate this trait based on cues beyond appearance, such as imagined demeanour or professionalism. As well as this, it also seems that there is very much a shift in positive attitudes. So there was a slightly higher non-judgmental ratings for tattooed therapists, which may reflect on this cultural shift towards acceptance of body art and reduced stigma. The limitations of our study was that it was an artificial environment. These people, the participants, were given doctored images in a self-done questionnaire. And these judgments were based off of these doctored images and not real therapeutic interactions, limiting that ecological validity of the study. The tattoo characteristics were also not explored. So we explored whether people had biases between tattoos being present, but we didn't so much look into the tattoo content, the style of the tattoos, the visibility of the tattoos, and any type of cultural symbolism these tattoos held. There was also a demographic bias. Due to the client population being of an average age of 29, this was a younger pool sample, most likely due to the SONA recruitment. And this may not affect the views of the older, more traditional clients. As we look from the historical perceptions, it has changed over time. And when we look at kind of older people that have more of a hold on from the Catholic Church, there therefore suggests that there is this kind of age effect that is on this bias. We can also look at the implications for person-centred counselling based on these results. So the results support the idea that visible self-expression, such as tattoos, doesn't hinder the core therapeutic conditions central to person-centred practice. So based off of these results, that tattoos and piercings really don't affect the therapeutic relationship. And findings may therefore encourage therapists to feel more confident in presenting authentically without fear of compromising client trust or engagement. For future research, it might be important to investigate how tattoo style, placement, or meaning affects these client perceptions, including more diverse populations to assess how cultural and generational factors shape responses to body art and therapists. It might be better to use qualitative methods more, looking at interviews or thematic analysis to explore the more nuanced judgments behind the participants, as well as exploring other forms of visible self-expression, like piercings, hair colour, clothing style, and their effects on perceived therapeutic qualities. In conclusion, overall, visible tattoos do not appear to negatively impact clients' perceptions of core therapeutic qualities. including empathy. The findings suggest that there is an increasing acceptance of in therapists' individuality and alignment with the values of person-centered therapy, such as authenticity and unconditional positive regard. I would like to say thank you so much for listening to this presentation. I'd really appreciate it if anyone had any questions. I'm more than happy to answer them. Here is my references slide. It's quite small. The text is quite small, so it might be a little bit hard to read. But thank you so much for listening. Bye.